Vážení dámy a pánové, první oznámení je, že this session will take place in English. Same place, different language. So I hope you're all fine with it. We have interpreters into sign language, but not into Czech. But if there's a word that's complicated, I can always interpret. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dan Ariely, one of my living heroes. This year I had we actually invited you last year already. You were my first choice, but it was a little bit too late, so we got a promise that you actually kept, which is also nice. Also subject to your research. And so how to introduce Dan Ariely? Dan Ariely is a psychologist, philosopher, began as one, and then drifted into business and economics, and now he is one of the key contributors to the new hope of economics, let's say one of the new hopes of economics, which is behavioral economics, which is a blend of humanity in the psychological sense and economics in its, let's say, rational and mathematical sense, if that's perhaps fair enough. When I was a young student, we were always looking for the lost paradigm, how to introduce člověčenství, humanity, into hard equations, and now behavioral science and behavioral economics seems to be one of the newer schools that have been attacking the mainstream Catholic ideology, and there is a little hope of Protestantism, if I may say so. So that's a brief introduction. Dan wrote many books. Those that you are most likely to know would be Predictably Irrational, and I have also been following your web, where Dan has a very friendly approach. So maybe let's start with a small little example of Dan's thinking. The story that I enjoyed the most that you used to explain economics is when you were at a similar concert and a locksmith approached you and said, hey, listen, can you please explain to me, when I was a young locksmith, I would screw up and break half of the locks that I lockpicked for people who forgot their keys inside, and it took me 2 hours, and I almost always destroyed the lock, so they had to buy a new one. However, then people paid me the full fee and tipped me. Now that I'm older and more experienced, and it takes me a minute or two, and I don't screw up people's locks, they are hesitant to pay me the same fee, and they never tip me. Why is this?
Yeah. So it's one of the most fascinating kind of ways in kind of introduction to economics, because it asks the question of what do we value? What are we willing to pay for? When you go to a rock concert, or you buy a drink, or you buy coffee, or whatever it is, what causes us to evaluate things as more versus less? And the insight from that story, and there's lots of other evidence for this, is that a big contributor is not what we get, is how much effort has gone into that. So think for a second about different industries in the world. Which industries show us a lot of effort? Which industries we see the effort that is being carried out for us? The most obvious one is restaurants. You go to restaurants, they have open kitchens, waiters come in and come out, things change, plates get moved, lots of action. Another one is McKinsey. Anybody here ever hired McKinsey? Okay,
it's a good group.
If you did, you know what happens. You ask them whatever question you ask them, you get a 500-page PowerPoint presentation. Your answer is on the last 600. Your question is on the last page, but how much could they charge you if they just gave you one page? Now, what industries don't show us effort? So, banking. Right? In the old days, you used to go to a bank, write a check, made to the self. You would show it to somebody. They would give you some cash. We saw some action. Now we do everything online. We don't see any action. Another industry, we don't see almost anything online. Online, everything is magical. I mean, yesterday was slight deviation for that magic, but mostly things are magic, and because of that, we don't appreciate them. Now, let us consider the following experiment. This is an experiment on a website that looks like Kayak. Anybody here has used Kayak before, the search engine for flights? Okay. One of the nice things about Kayak is they show you the work they do for you. We're searching United, we're searching American, things are moving on the screen. Imagine 3 conditions. Condition 1, you type a search query, you press enter, you get the results. Great. Condition 2, you type the search query, you press enter, and you get a screen of death, a black screen with a wheel for 12 seconds. And then you get the results. How happy are people? Terrible. 12 seconds, that's awful. Condition number 3, you type, you press enter, you wait 12 seconds. It's the same 12 seconds. But those 12 seconds are filled with, we're searching American, we're searching United, things are moving on the screen. What happens now to satisfaction? It's even higher than not waiting at all. Now, do people say, I want to wait? Of course not. But they're basically saying, I can see the effort. I can see what I got. I can see I could have never done that myself. Now, 2 more things about this. This advice about showing effort is true for lots of things. There are lots of things that we do and we don't show effort. But if we show people effort, they're more willing to appreciate us or to pay us. The same thing holds for romantic relationship. If you take couples and you put them in separate rooms and you say to them, look, whatever you tell me now, I'll never tell your significant other. And then you say, but tell me the truth. From the 100% work in the relationship, what percent do you do? And you get 2 answers and then you add them up. What happens? It's always more than 100%. Now, why is it always more than 100%? It's because we are always in the Kayak condition for ourselves. We always know the little details of everything we do. I say to myself, I take out the trash. That's like a 16-step process. It requires skill and finesse. There's knowledge connected to it. My significant other, she only pays the bills. That's one thing. So we end up overestimating our own effort and underestimating the other side's effort. Now, I know what you're thinking. Once a year, I'll do the McKinsey thing. I'll tell my significant other, please sit, let me do a 500-page PowerPoint presentation. I'm not recommending the full McKinsey thing, but yes, it's true. From time to time, we should show effort. And I'll give you one last example. I went to visit a bank in a country I will not name. And we were talking about some other things, and then they told me that on that month, when I showed 2 weeks later, they're going to stop charging people for ATM fees. Here, do banks charge people for ATM fees? Yes, no? Okay. Some people yes, some people no. Okay. So in that country, they charge people $2.50 for ATM fees. And they said, we're going to cancel that. We're going to stop charging people. And I said, why? What drove that decision? It's a big decision to stop charging this. And they said, people would love us for this. And I say, I have a different hypothesis. I think people would hate you for this. They said, how can people hate us? And I said, look, what you think is people would say, thank you for not charging us anymore. I think what people would say is, you bastard, why do you charge me for the last 10 years? And then I said, and here is what I recommend that you do. When people come to the ATM, tell them what's the real cost of the ATM. Because it costs money, right? It's not free. Tell them. They put the thing, they punch the number, and you say, the real cost for ATM use is about $2. And then tell them the following. Say, we understand that not everybody feels financially wealthy. So if you don't feel that you can pay those $2, feel free to pay us less. In fact, feel free to pay us as little as you want, up to $0. And I said, if you do that, 2 things will happen. You will not discount the value of the service, And some people would pay you. I don't know how many people would pay you, but some people would pay, maybe not the full $2, but for sure you'll get more than zero. Anyway, I don't know if you know banks. Banks are very slow in adopting anything. So, of course, they went ahead with their own program, and what happened? Lots of hate. Lots of hate. And because money is not just about money. Money is about a sense of fairness. And what are we paying for? And the moment we forget that and we think of it just as a medium of transaction, we leave a lot of value on the table and we make lots of stupid mistakes.
So this seems like an optical nuance, but it really is the kernel that gave Marxism rise, because what Dan is describing is a labor value, labor theory of value. Things have value because effort has been put into it, while managing doesn't take any effort, or owning capital doesn't take any effort. Thus, the capitalist is taking the value that belongs to the sweat and blood of the workers. So this little detail, which took us a long, long time in economics to understand in the first place, even Smith it was one of the big mistakes of classical economy, that the theory of value was based on human labor.
Yeah. But by the way, one other really interesting thing about this whole agenda is gifts. You know, economists think that gift is a waste of effort, right? If I invited you to my house for dinner, and let's say you were going to spend 30 euros on a bottle of wine, you should come and say, Dan, thank you very much for inviting me for dinner. I was going to spend 30 euros on a bottle of wine, but I don't know what wine you like, red, white, what variety. So instead of me buying wine that you don't like as much, here is 30 euros. Go and buy yourself the best possible wine for $30. That's kind of the economic ideal, right? No loss of utility. But of course, who wants to live in that world that people do that? The reality is that economic exchanges sometimes look like economic exchanges, but are not. A gift is supposed to lubricate our social relationship, right? It's not supposed to be, I don't need new socks from you, or a bottle of wine. If we think about gifts, gifts are about creating a new type of relationship. We did that. And I'll say one more thing about gifts. I don't think that people are sufficiently courageous gift givers. You know, next time you're going to give gifts, don't worry if the other person doesn't like the gift. Like, you know, we give gifts like chocolates and wine because we're not creating a burden on the other person. Don't worry about creating a burden to the other person. You want an ugly pillow on their sofa because you want them to remember you. The reality is that gifts are not about an economic exchange. Okay, if it's too ugly, of course, it's too much. But gifts are about lubricating the social relationship, about getting somebody to care more about you. And even if you get them a pillow that they don't like so much, it's still better because they'll look at that ugly pillow and they'll remember you with some fondness and some criticism, but still, it would lubricate the relationship.
It's also quite interesting because in Czech, dát a pro dát have the same base of the word, but when we exchange sale-wise, so sale and gift are similar word, and we do the ritual in a completely different way. So when I'm selling something to you, I have a tendency to overvalue the gift. This is the only pen that Michael touched, and it has this and that value. And you will say, no, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure I want it. I don't like it, the color. And then maybe he even walks out. So he's trying to pretend he doesn't really want it and that the value for him is lower than the price. And I'm trying to pretend that the value is higher than the price, naturally. But when it comes to gifts, did you notice that that goes in a complete reverse?
Yeah.
So I give you a very, very expensive gift. You say thank you, and I say what? Oh, that's nothing. Don't mention it. Rien. Don't není zač. And he says, no, that's exactly the pillow that I wanted. Yes. I've been dreaming of a pillow with a reindeer on it. And you go, no, it's just something that I saw in the show. Don't even mention it. So it's quite an interesting reversal of the ritual. in both moments, the exchange takes place, but one goes through the institution of sale, and the other one goes through the institution of gift. Gift is something that bothered us economists ever since Mauss wrote the book on gift, because it's something that we don't really like, because it exactly behaves opposite. And if you remember the famous scene in Reservoir Dogs by Quentin Tarantino, the introduction scene about why would you tip a waiter that you're never going to see again, is a fundamental economic debate.
Yeah.
We are drifting very nicely towards the main topic that I would like to talk, and that is this topic of meaningfulness, which is quite interesting because you've drifted through so many different areas, not just academic, medicine, psychology, but also applications. You have many web applications if you want to improve the quality of your life. There are, I don't know, 6, lots of applications. And you wrote a book for children. Congratulations. And now I understand that your topic is meaningfulness.
So
how do you approach the subject
of
analytically? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing some new things these days. I wrote a kids book. I also helped write a Hollywood TV show, loosely based on my life. It's called The Irrational. It's about a university professor who helps the FBI solves crime. We're writing and producing the second season right now. Really fascinating to go and see how a Hollywood series is being made.
Are you happy with the actor?
Yeah.
Charming enough?
It's tough, right? Imagine that you have somebody saying your sentences, but not exactly the way you do. It's a little tough. But I also have an ex-wife in the show. That's a different story. So the question of meaning is very interesting. Reflect for a second about all the things in your life that you feel are the most meaningful. What characterize them? And specifically, how many of them are comprised of many moments of laughter and joy? Not so much, right? Most of the things that we define as meaningful are complex and challenging. They take a long time. Maybe even the feeling is more connected to crying than to laughing. But nevertheless, those are the things that we're the most proud of. And it's a real interesting mystery. In the US, there's the statement, you have the right to pursue happiness. What do we have the right to pursue? Is it sitting on the beach drinking mojito? Is that the goal of human life? Yeah, you know, it's fun to sit on the beach from time to time drinking mojito, but is that really how we want our life to be full? Not so much. In fact, it's amazing. Anybody here ever ran a marathon? Half a marathon. Okay, people who raised their hand for full should raise their hand for half as well. Anyway, I never ran a marathon. I have no intention to running a marathon, but I watched lots of people running marathons. And I'll tell you something important, they don't seem happy. If you ever wondered, and you say, oh, you know, maybe they're happy at the end. No, it's painful, it's difficult. But marathons are an example for something that is painful, difficult, almost humanly impossible to do. And nevertheless, it creates tremendous amount of motivation for people. What is this motivation? So imagine we wrote an equation, M motivation equal, and we wrote all the things in there. What would be in there? So yes, so we want to get paid, and yes, we want a mojito on the beach from time to time, and we want all kinds of things. But what's the whole range of things that would be there? It's kind of an amazing set of things. And what I worry about is that we don't think enough about those things, and because of that, we don't live up to our potential. And I'll give you the two big areas that I'm thinking about these days. The first area is the last chapter of people's lives. So think about the chapter from when people get a terminal illness diagnosis until the end of life. It's slightly longer than 5 years on average in the Western world, thanks to modern medicine. How good is that chapter? Right now it's not that good. But how good could it be? It could be quite good. In fact, when I talk to palliative care experts, and I say, please imagine the following scenario. Somebody gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, they come into your care, and you help them manage the quality of their lives. And you stay with them until they die. And then they die, and 30 minutes later, you wake them up. I know it's not possible, but for the experiment. You wake them up for the thought experiment. And then you tell them, look, there's a chapter of life you can experience again. Elementary school, middle school, high school. You pick. Which one would you repeat again? And they think that most people would pick the last chapter of life, if done correctly. Now, when you think about it, what are the people that have a good last chapter of life do? And what would the palliative experts do to those people? Is to live in a very different way. One of the challenges that we have is that we live an unexamined life. We're here in the festival, but the regular day is tomorrow is going to be like yesterday. How often do we actually examine our life and saying, what am I doing? Should I re-examine things? Should I actually think very deeply about, is this where I want to be? And what kind of capacity and energy do I have for changes? The people who get terminal illness diagnosis under the right condition do tremendous amount of changes. They stop lots of things, they start lots of things. A lot of them fixed relationships that have been broken for many years. You know, all of these things require effort and attention, deliberation. And if we don't have a time bomb clicking, we don't necessarily do it. Now, it's a very sad thing about humanity that we need a bad news to get us to committed. But it is the case. That's one area that I'm thinking about meaning. And when I recently finished a set of conversation with end-of-life doulas. Do you know this profession? Do you have it here? Do you have doulas? Doulas are women that help, usually women, help to bring life into the world. End-of-life doula help in the last few days, sometimes the last few weeks. I'm actually going to do, next month I'll do the training myself to become one. Not a woman, just... and when we asked them, what is a good end of life? They said, no pain, very doable with modern medicine. No loss of dignity in the body, complex but possible to do some of it. Feeling surrounded by love and having legacy, which is a sense of meaning. So you know, I think about this sense of meaning is kind of crucial to the way we live. How do we think about it? How we inject more of it? So that's one. And then the second area that I'm very concerned with is the labor market. We go to work. What do we want to get out of work? So I've been running the following exercise for the last 8 years. I've been measuring how companies treat employees, how employees feel about the company, and what are the implications of that in the stock market. Right? The stock market growth is one indication of productivity. It's not the only one, but it's one good way. Now, what do you think matters? What are the things that if companies treat their employees and if employees feel about the company, create growth? Is it about salary? No. Health benefits? No. Retirement benefits? No. All the things that matter end up having a big role in what we call intrinsic motivation. The number one driver is, do you feel appreciated? You know, things like that end up making a big difference. And, you know, I think economics has a lot of beautiful elements to it. But by focusing on financial exchanges, we've forgotten some very important things and actually hurt the economy in this process. And focusing again about what it is to feel intrinsically motivated, what it is to feel a sense of legacy. All of those things are incredibly important.
So I'm writing a book on a similar subject, and I've approached it from a different angle. I started as an economist, now I'm drifting rather towards philosophy, which is luckily not mutually exclusive. Where's my... Aha! Now you signaled.
Yeah, yeah. That's it.
And it's okay for me to open a can.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Na zdraví. So the way I look at it is I distinguish between soul and spirit. This is my novelty. I have not heard of any other philosopher or theologian who does that. So when there is an entity, let's take this plastic cup, almost all entities comprise of three things. Body, which is the atoms. Those are the things that you find on a periodic table. And that would be a bodily thing. And then this plastic has a shape, it has a form, and that would be the soul. The soul is non-tangible, but it is real. It is objectively real. A good example of that would be language, for example. Language is not made of atoms. It is not real. It doesn't occupy space-time position. It's not exclusive in space-time either. Unlike this cup, there is either a cup or there is a can. Both can't be in the same place at the same time. But one lives exactly at the same place like number two, and mathematics is also a good example of a soul entity that does not have a body. It manifests in cows and in numbers of beer, but till today, we don't actually even know how number two looks like. We don't know how three looks like. We know how three cows look like, but we don't know how three. Three doesn't have a color, and plus doesn't have a, plus doesn't exist, equals doesn't exist. But it's an objectively real thing. Nobody here doubts that math does not exist. Of the same matter is money. Money is also a non-material thing. It appears sometimes as a banknote or as a coin, but that's only 8% representation. Most of your money is somewhere in the soul plane of a numbers of ones and zeros in some bank. So soul is something that exists, it's objective, it's analytical, and it can be stored and it can be communicated. And then there is a spirit, and spirit holds meaning. It is not analytical. You really have to very often pass in silence, which you see quite nicely when you ask an artist or a poet or a philosopher. And I have a whole book of philosophers ask the same question. Why do you write? Why do you philosophize? Why do you create artificial layers of problems that already exist in the world? And the answer, almost also asking them for motivation, the answer is always, if I can summarize all the answers into one sentence, I don't know, I am possessed. Something makes me do it. So here, I'm trying to separate these two objects. I mean, some areas we don't want to have the spirit. I mean, there are areas in life, and there's a big debate in economics where I want to end this prologue with a question, because for centuries, we economists have been fighting whether economics should have a spirit, whether it should have some higher meaning, or whether it's just analysis like accounting, that we don't do any philosophical or meta-analytic statements, except, for example, that every human being is rational and that every human being optimizes and is kind of an egoistic utility maximizer. And this has been the kernel of the meaning of economics. And I just wonder...
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Now that you talk about this distinction, I wonder whether a lot of the effort in psychology is to turn spirit into soul.
Yes.
Is to basically take the things that we don't know how to define, because I love this notion of a soul, but it means a structure.
Yes.
And if I think about psychology, like, we see visual illusions. It comes from a structure. We have a capacity for love. It comes from a structure. We react to certain chemicals. And I think over time we discovered more and more things that were undescribable in a particular way, and now we're getting them to be more described with a structure. And yes, they don't have a container in the standard way, but they have some laws that govern them that we can think about.
Not only in psychology, I think the same process is happening in mathematics as well. Mathematics was a very small soul. 2,500 years ago, it was basically adding and subtracting, and then the soul grew to quantum realms which would be considered magic 50 years ago and completely beyond our understanding. So in my view, human beings are animals possessed by the spirit. Like, it's in English, it's nice because you can be possessed by a spirit, and you possess things. So I possess these shoes because I am the meaning of these shoes. So the meaning of this, The spirit of this cup is me. I am the one who possesses it. I'm the one who uses it. This cup has no idea why is it created. And we live in a world that's basically artificial. We live in a world where everything that you've ever seen, touched, smelled, has been made by human beings for human beings in an artificial manner. I mean, look around you. There is nothing that has any sense outside of the realm of the human possession by human spirit. So I wonder, for 200 years, we've been calculating economics on the kernel of utility, and it's a model that works. It's not perfect, it has loopholes, but it somehow works. We're not happy with it. Both of us are trying to change it. Every economist is trying to come up with a new way of looking at it. We have been all looking for a Copernican, if I may maybe exaggerate a little bit, we're looking for a Copernican turn, meaning the calculations are much easier when you actually have the sun at the center of our solar system. The equations work as well if the Earth is to be the center, but the equations are extremely complicated and confusing, as you can imagine. Would it be fair to say that perhaps this Copernican move is something that we are expecting in economics as well? Would it be possible, instead of the 200 years of basing egoism as a kernel of economic progress, have you ever thought of recalculating the whole? It would be a massive work. Yeah. But if the kernel would be that we human beings are rich and far away from the poverty of animals or the economic poverty of animals, not because of our egoism, but because of our kindness.
Yeah. So, multiple questions in this.
Sorry.
No, but it's
at least I have time to drink.
It's a great topic and good time for beer.
Which is the same thing.
So let me say two separate things. So I have mostly spent my professional life fighting economists. But it's not because I don't like economists. I like economists a lot. I think economic is a discipline that has tremendous amount of beauty exactly because it's so narrow. And generally speaking, there are two types of economics, descriptive and prescriptive. As a descriptive study, economics says this is how the world is described. Is economics capturing 100% of the world? Of course not. Is it capturing some part of the world? Absolutely yes. So economics as a descriptive study is like sociology, anthropology, philosophy, psychology. It's a perspective on the world that describes part of the story. But economics also had the unbelievable arrogance to become a prescriptive study. And a prescriptive study says, not only do we describe the world, we can tell you how to design the world. We can tell you what to do next. And don't listen to anybody else. We have the full answer with us. And that's where I disagree with economics. If you say it's a descriptive part of the world, it has some value, absolutely. If you say this is the only tool we should use to design the world, to design a taxation system, to design compensation, to design schools, whatever it is, that's the part that bothers me. And my view is that we're just not that smart, all of us. And what we need to do is to have the humility of an experiment. So we should say, look, we want to design a better school system. I don't think anybody has the right answer, but let's decide to try it out. Come up with a few versions that we think are likely to work, and let's try it out and see what actually works. What is the best way to create hospitals? Oh, I'm not so sure. I have some ideas, some from sociology, anthropology, psychology, economics. Let's create a few versions and try it out. So I think we should take all social sciences into account, and we should test things. And by the way, we should also recognize that our testing is short-lived. Because in 5 years from now, reality will be different. And maybe we need to revise some things, right? Do we want to create a school system now that will stay the same for 100 years? Absolutely not. So we need this. I'm hoping for one day to create an empirical approach to policy making. And to basically say that in the same way that every drug that is being introduced to the market has to go through FDA testing, every policy that gets implemented needs to go through a substantial, rigorous process of making sure that it actually does what it's supposed to do. So that's one answer on kind of economics. And for that, I don't think economics needs to be more complex. I think it just needs to have a bit more humility about what it is that it's trying to create.
But if you give a powerful tool to somebody that already, I mean, a man with a hammer sees the whole world as a nail.
Yeah.
And if I say, and I like that distinction between prescriptive and descriptive, but I would like to dig into this a little bit deeper. So a prescriptive sentence from an economist should be, you should all maximize your utility. You should all behave in your own interests. We don't say that because we're not supposed to. What we say instead, you all are egoists, period. There's nothing you can do to not be homo economicus. So the distinction between a model that is descriptive, so
yeah.
Are we egoistic? Is it a model that is, that's a wrong assumption? Like when you calculate a free fall, you also assume that the friction of air doesn't exist, which is a stupid assumption because if we want the friction of air to exist.
Yeah. So that for me is the second answer to your question. So I think economics have some value even with some of the simplified, inaccurate assumptions. But the more difficult question that you have is, what if we decided to relax some of our most basic assumptions? And in particular, one of the most interesting basic assumptions is, are people selfish or not? Forget for a second whether we fully maximize or not, but what is our utility? What are we trying to maximize? Are we trying to maximize things for ourselves or for others? So as you said, economists have a couple of puzzles. Why do we give a tip in a restaurant we never intend to go back to? Why do we vote? Why do we give advice to people we're not going to meet again?
For free.
Like imagine somebody asks you, what's a good restaurant? You should send them to a terrible restaurant. Do you want your favorite restaurant to have a bigger queue? Of course not. You know, when you start thinking about people as selfish, it's kind of amazing, and it doesn't fit almost anything we see in our lives, right? A lot of things we see in our life are people being extra generous. Now, are people generous as much as we hope they would be? Maybe not, but are they more generous than economic theory predicts? Absolutely yes. I've done lots of research on dishonesty. I find that lots of people cheat a little bit. Now, the surprising thing for an economist is how come people in my experiment don't cheat a lot? Like, why? How come? How come somebody come to an experiment, they have a chance to make $200 and they only make 20? Like, why? Where's the rest? But I think there are two parts for that. I think one is that we are inherently with a tremendous capacity for caring about other people. So I think that if I could revise economics, what we call social utility, or caring about others, is incredibly important. But the other part of it is that we are in general an outcome of interactions. That's also not part of the economic system. We are an outcome of an interaction. We're an outcome of interaction with the people around us, and we're an outcome of interaction with the system that we're in. So a human being who encountered one case of terrible betrayal could become a different person. A human being who encountered one time a tremendous case of human generosity could become a different person. We have this analysis of people who are selfish and individuals. The reality is that we have lots of interactions. We have interactions like, would humanity have been better without Twitter? Yes, of course. Right? We found a terrible way to interact with other people. It makes us all worse off. So it's not us, it's us and other people, it's us and technology. And I think we need to change. If I had to change, I would change both of those assumptions. I would get people to be represented as having social utility, and I would have people as represented as a system. and not just as individuals. And this is actually very hopeful, because systems are easier to change, right? If you think about it, much easier to change systems than to change people.
So if economics developed differently, let's say which actually isn't that far from what almost happened, because the Benthamite utilitarianism, which is at the kernel, isn't an individualistic utilitarianism, it's a collective utilitarianism. So if somebody in this group was a millionaire, if he would be a true Benthamite utilitarian, he or she would give away their income, because by halving their income, they would not suffer so much disutility as giving all of you 1,000,000 crowns each. Yeah. So if we did that calculation, or if that rich person did the calculation, the collective utility would be higher if he gave away his and economics, even though we are the ones who gave utilitarianism a bad name, because we introduced this individualistic utilitarianism, which is easier to calculate. Yes. The other would be also possible to calculate. It would be more complicated. It would be more fuzzy. It wouldn't be so clear.
Yeah. Only when you start studying. I don't know how many of you studied economics, but only when you start looking at economics as an outcome of what's easy to calculate,
yeah, it starts to make sense.
You realize what it is, and then you say, forget economics. What else in life is happening only because it's easy? And that's really a big part of behavioral economics, is about life can be described, choices can be described often in terms of what's easy to do. I'll give you just an example. How many of you probably have right now rotting fruits and vegetables in your refrigerators? Okay, those who did not raise your hand, when you go home, check your refrigerator. Most likely you haven't visited those drawers in a long time. Now, why does it happen? It happens because we open the refrigerator drawer, we start thinking about what we want to eat, we do what's easy, which is to look at eye level. Bending down and opening these drawers is a little bit too much effort, so we end up not opening them until it's too late. But it's true about economics, it's true about everyday behavior, that eventually effort makes a behavior much more likely or not. It's not what we want, it's what easier and harder, including some theories.
So what is, in your view now, the meaning of economics, and does our liberal capitalist system, democratic capitalist system, is it able to come to this meaning? And how would such a stationary state, talking about John Stuart Mill, he envisioned this stationary state. So the original economists were asking themselves questions: how will the society look once all the economic process have taken place? Will it be a just society, or will it be a bad society? And this is where Marxism was born, because the classical economics, during their time of dismal science, could not come with any predictable, long-term, meaningful, stationary heavens or havens for economics. And this is why Marx came with this grand narrative of destroying capitalism. And when you think of the systems today, capitalism has come to the point where we've managed to secure all the requirements that Marxists have. But one of the things that we burned, us as economists, from it, is we don't do these long-term projections anymore, perhaps exactly because of Marx. And we've retired from these grand topics, and we only predict the future next year: GDP, inflation, unemployment, interest rates, differential, and exchange, and whatnot. What is, for you, the meaning of economy? When can we say the building is built, like Keynes predicted in 1930? One day we will finish the building. We will no longer need architects, economists. We will need something, some spirit to fill the building with. And another question, so that you have many to choose from. We are now in a situation where totalitarian regimes are attacking liberal regimes, both in Israel and in Ukraine. Both Israel and Ukraine are the most out-eastern outposts or marks of the West. So there's a competition between these two systems. Yep. What's your take on that from behavioral point of view?
Well, two easy questions. So let's start with the first one. What is the building? I like that metaphor. What is the building of the economy? And the fact is that this building is changing in dramatic ways. What are the ways in which this building is changing? The first one is that we are becoming much more interconnected. Think about smoking. I've seen more smoking here than I see in the US, but I'm guessing even here smoking has gone down. Why have we been able to reduce smoking? It's because we created this term secondhand smoke. Now, secondhand smoke is a very small effect, but we made the people who are smokers to feel like they're potential killers, right? We would look at them badly, we would send them out of buildings, we did all kinds of things to secondhand smoker because we said, you're killing everybody else. Not so true, but we said it anyway. The reality is that we have created a world that we are more interconnected than we were before. If one person is a terrible driver, they have a chance to kill other people. If one person doesn't check themselves for cancer and they get cancer, they cost the whole society. If one person is mistreating their kids and something bad is happening to them, we are an interconnected society in unprecedented way. We are really like a family in a much bigger way than we were before, and every year we're becoming more and more like that. So I think that this building that we've created is a very different building because of the degree to which we are interconnected. And it's in all kinds of ways. If you had a friend that was going to open a restaurant and he came to you and said, hey, I have an idea, I want to open a restaurant. What should your advice to them be? Don't.
Don't do it, yeah.
Don't do it. It's very expensive. The chances of success are very low.
Non-scalable, almost.
And then you say, how much would you like to live in a country where nobody opened restaurants? Not so much. As a collective, we benefit a lot from the crazy people who do things that might be terrible for them but good for society. It's true about research. You know, when I talk to the people who work with me, I say, if more than 50% of your experiments work the way you thought so, you're not trying hard enough. You're doing things that are too trivial. You're not trying to do things that are difficult and complex and painful. You want to get results that you didn't expect. You want to fail. That's why we have startups. So we are interconnected in all kinds of ways, and it requires new way of thinking. By the way, even university education. It used to be that you got the university education, you were sure to get a job. Not so sure today. Today it's like a lottery. You go, you get the university education, you might have gotten one good idea that propels you in the future, and maybe you got 0 ideas. On average, I think it's still a great idea. But now it's a distribution with the gambling. And whenever we have these things where we're disconnected, we are interconnected, we need to think differently about society. For example, society should take more of the risk. I think we should encourage people to open restaurants. I think we should encourage people to go to university, to take more risk. So we are, as a society, we have changed our structure a lot, and we need to think about that. The second big change, of course, is AI. What will happen? Very hard to predict. The acceleration is very strange, very quick, hard to predict what professions will not be with us in 2 years from now, hard to predict what will be the percentage of unemployment, short-term and long-term. And as a society, we have to think about how we deal with it, right? It's not, we can no longer say it's the problem of the individuals. If you went to become a lawyer, your problem. No, we have to think again about what is the contract between a country and citizens in this world in which exogenous shocks are coming. Because, by the way, if we don't react good to it as a society, what will happen with the next shock? You know, what are people going to study? What are they going to do? So we have to take the long-term view. So anyway, I think we have such big changes to our house that we're not going to be left without a job. I think actually our job is becoming harder and harder with our interconnection and with AI and disruptions in general, disruptions for food, disruption for the structure of countries. I mean, I think we have lots of work, and I think it's bigger jobs than to think about simple things. In terms of what's happening in Ukraine and also in Israel, obviously very, very painful, very, very difficult. I get calls from both countries to deal with all kinds of very, very sad, very complex things. You can analyze that situation with lots of levels, and lots of them, all of them are sad, but one layer is that this is I think the first start of a version of Third World War. Now, will that be slow? Will it be fast? How would it look like? I don't know. But it's a real war of East versus West. And it's easy to say, oh, it's Ukraine, or it's Gaza, or it's Hezbollah, or it's, you know, the Houthis. But I don't think that's the case. If you think about the involvement of Iran, if you think about the involvement of Russia, even with the Houthis attack from 2 days ago, there were discussions with Russia. There's a deep, I think there's a deep sense that we are trying to not think about the possibility that this is a real question of East versus West, but I think it is East versus West. And one of our challenges is that we, me included, have a theory about humanity. And that when we have a disagreement with somebody that doesn't have the same theory, it's very hard to understand what are the rules of the game. And I think we're in that situation that we are getting into a war when we don't know the rules of the game. Iran, in the paper today, they said that Iran is about 2 weeks away from nuclear weapon. That's a very, very frightening proposition. I want to finish on something happy.
I gave two okay. questions we have here.
Very good.
So, but our system will win, no? Love and truth will triumph over hate and love.
I think we have to work very hard at it. I think it will not win by itself. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
So, first question, very brief questions, very brief answers. We only have 3 more minutes. And ask something in which the answer could be or has to be optimistic.
Okay. Hello. Firstly, thank you very much for interesting discussion. I have a rather broader question regarding your work and regarding the question of irrationality. Does the irrationalities manifest itself in a way that you know, we as humans don't really go for optimal solutions. We don't really behave as per the generic economic equations, or is it rather in a way that we are actually very rational? We are actually going for the optimal solutions. We just don't understand the value on which we optimize correctly. Which one of these is it rather?
So the question is, what is the nature of irrationality and rationality? To give a quick answer, we have lots of irrationalities. There's one way to be rational. There are lots of ways to be irrational. But some of the irrational part is not bad. We write poetry, we fall in love. We help people cross the street. Irrationality does not equal bad. It just means we're very different from the model. So I would say that some of it is that we're just very different from the model. For example, we have social utility. And some of it is that we're just very bad in computing things, especially long-term utility function. That's our sign that our time is up. But I guess we have one more question.
We have one more question. A nice answer that maybe we're rational, we're reasonable. Like that. Last question, sir, please.
Yeah, thank you. So we got many experts in the government on education. And some of them suggest that the school is important to prepare us for job. Some say that the education is important for the job that don't exist yet. And some even say that it's important for children, the education to self, improvement, critical thinking, etc. What's your take on this?
So,
Is rationality enough to explain our lust for education?
Education. So, first of all, there was an amazing study in which this was happened, they looked back 30 years ago. And they compared, imagine two classes. It's a regression model, but imagine two classes. Class 1, first grade, 1 year, they get an average teacher. Class 1. Class 2, first grade, they get a teacher that is bottom 10% of teachers. And then they wait 50 years. And they say, what's the change of income of that class, average teacher, compared to this class, minus 10%. Now, it happened many years ago and so on. The difference in lifetime income between the two classes is almost $300,000. 1 year, average teacher compared to a bottom 10% teacher. Now, it's 30 kids in a class, so you can say, oh, it's not so much. It's a lot. It's a lot. Teachers give a lot to kids. Teachers give a lot to kids. Now, the other thing that is very clear is that all the education of doing things just in a classroom without the parents taking a role in that are not very successful. So it's very easy to say, oh, we're sending our kids to school. Not enough. Not enough. By the way, the same thing is true for democracy. Voting once every 4 years is no way to run a country. We need to be more active in the education of our kids. So if you ask me, I think all of those things are incredibly important. But the other thing is that parents have to also take a much more active role in the education of their kids. The music is playing.
Perfect.